Hello and welcome to the trade setup. In this video we are looking at Tilray brands. This was a stock analysis request from one of the followers, and I wanted to let you know that anyone can make these requests and I will most likely cover them, especially if there is an actionable trade setup to follow. And on this chart we have been exploring the idea of having a larger bottom already formed, and honestly it is still technically possible, but we haven't managed to form the structure we were tracking to the upside fully. Now, before we get there, I am currently still tracking this as an ABC movement that could technically be complete, yeah, where we have even formed a potential impulse in the wave C, and we have reached perfectly the 100% extension of the wave A. Yeah, I suppose we have fallen a bit below it, but nothing too significant. And in that case, I'm not necessarily looking, however, for a direct extension within this movement to the downside. Yeah, even in the case of further movements down, I would still like to see a larger 1-2 setup to be formed in this area, but the evidence doesn't necessarily suggest a high probability for a continuation in this uptrend. And within this structure, we have the reasons why, because we have been looking for a potential larger 5-wave move to the upside, where technically it would have been perfectly fine to consider this as a 1, 2, 3, only if we had managed to reach the ideal target within the wave 3 here, which would have been the 138.2% extension of the wave 1. In this area, we haven't even managed to get to the level below that, the 123.6% extension. We fell a little bit short of those levels, and in that case, while technically it isn't impossible for this structure to still be tracked and consider this a full 5-wave move to the upside, it doesn't help too much the probabilities of this structure to be a 5-wave move, as opposed to having it more as an ABC structure, or even an ABC structure like this. Yeah, there is even more than one ways to actually track this as a 5-wave movement, or sorry, a 3-wave movement. And in the previous video we have been looking for direct extensions higher, where we were tracking within this 5th wave of the larger wave 3, a 5-wave move to the upside. We had only formed at that point the wave 1, 2, and 3, and we were looking for the correction in the wave 4, and perfectly we have touched the 38.2% retracement level, which is the ideal target for the wave 4, formed the 5th wave, but then we didn't get our larger wave 4 correction and another high. This is what would have allowed me to look for a larger wave 3 that would have formed in this area. We would have had the ideal target be even exceeded, and in that case we would have had, if we had actually a 4th and a 5th, we had a much more clear 5-wave structure to the upside that would have allowed us to look for a quite reliable 1-2 setup. Now, with that said, we can now remove these small time frame counts, but with that said, I could allow this to be the 3rd, have here the 4th and a 5th, and look for a wave 2 correction. But again, it's not the high probabilities that I am always looking for to have a trade setup be a higher recommendation. And while now I can allow here an area of support for the correction in the wave 2, again, not necessarily a high probability for me, or at least not enough of a high probability for a reliable recommendation on this chart. Now, if we are, however, to consider this a wave 1 top and look for a wave 2 correction, we have so far pushed into first the 50% retracement, where we had our first more significant reaction, then the 61.8% retracement, which was only recently, only in the last week we have gotten here, and again we had a tiny reaction at least, and we are looking to see if we manage to form a low, because after all, within this pattern to the downside, I am at least able to track a full corrective pattern complete. I could be tracking this as an A, B, C movement to the downside, where honestly I know I don't need any additional lows. Yeah, within this area, if I were to be even looking for the ideal extensions here within the wave C, yeah, in the wave C we are always looking for a 5-wave move, and I would consider this a 1, 2, a 3rd wave down, 4th wave up, and then a 5th wave to the downside. This pattern is full. We can look even for the ideal extension for the wave 3, see if we have gotten that achieved, and yeah, we have pushed just a little bit below the 138.2% extension of the wave 1, and in that case I don't need any further continuations to the downside, but right now it is still too early to tell. Now, if I were to be looking here internally within this structure, I also don't need any additional lows to have a full count. It is also in the very small time frame, and I wouldn't focus too much on that. The only area of resistance that I would be watching out for now would be in the case of a 1, 2, and then a third wave that has formed down in this area. Because yeah, this is working out as an impulse. What we have here in the wave C can be considered an impulse. And in this interpretation, well, I could be watching out already for the resistance levels between the $8.4 all the way up to the $10.3 level at the 50% retracement, where as long as we stay below that, there is still significant pressure that this structure could evolve into a 5-wave move to the downside. Now, I wouldn't expect too large of a correction within this wave 4. Yeah, after all, the correction here in the wave 2 was relatively tiny, and in that case, something similar could play out in this correction, but I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if it only gets briefly into this area of resistance and pushes lower directly if this pattern is to play out. But keep in mind, at this point, I don't yet have any confirmation that this movement, this wave to the downside is complete, or even this larger wave 3. This is, however, the most relevant area of resistance that I can track on a relatively relevant time frame, yeah? And again, I want to reframe, or not even reframe, I want to recap. So on this chart, we are looking for a potential 1, 2 setup, but the ideal target within the wave 3 has not been reached. This isn't a very high probability setup. However, technically, it can be allowed to be a 5-wave move to the upside, and a 1, 2 setup is technically possible, but the potential is just not as high. Now, if you really are interested, a level that would provide even further confirmation that this structure is going to fail would be breaking below the 78.6% retracement. And then if we actually form here this 5-wave move to the downside, well, I would expect a relief rally in a 3-wave pattern, but then I would much rather prefer a continuation in another 5-wave move to the downside, because unlike in the uptrend, we have managed to reach here in this downtrend the ideal target within the wave 3. Yeah, we can even check here within this orange interpretation. We have gotten just above the 161.8% extension of the wave 1. Yeah, we have surpassed the ideal target for the wave 3, which is more than enough to be considering this a reliable impulse that could be forming. And for now, this is it. These are the levels. This is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, don't forget to subscribe and let me know what else you want me to cover. And I'll do my best to do that in the days and weeks ahead. And until then, I hope you have a nice day and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.